Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and anything else that strikes my fancy. You can find this podcast on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. YouTube, it's youtube.com/Annette Talks. Facebook, you can find me on facebook.com/Annette Talks, or you can look for me on my personal Facebook page, Annette Mashler Bybee. Anyway, if you like what you see, please forward or share these podcasts, share these videos so we can get the word out. And today I'm going to be talking about Antifa or Antifa. I never know what's the right way to pronounce that. Not that it really matters, but they're big in the news right now, and because of all the protests that are going on. If you're listening to this later, today's June 13th, 2020, and we've been having all sorts of protests around the country, mostly driven by Black Lives Matter. No. But there is always another element to these protests, or I shouldn't say always, but oftentimes there's another element, a violent element. And some people are saying that Antifa is at some of these protests. So I will cover Black Lives Matter another day, but today I want to talk about Antifa. And I want to start with this quote by Thomas Jefferson. "The mobs of the great cities add just so much to the support of pure government as sores do to the strength of the human body. It is the manners and spirit of a people which preserve a republic in vigor. A degeneracy in these is a canker which soon eats to the heart of its laws and constitution." And Antifa, in my thinking, is a mob. And so I want to talk about what that is, because I think when we hear that, we tend to think that there's this organization with a leader and chapters and all that, but it's not. So I've done a lot of research. I've looked on websites on the left, on the right, in between. I've looked on a website that is for Antifa followers. And I'm going to give you the information that I found and my take on it. All right, so what's the history here? The Antifa movement traces its heritage to radical left groups that resisted dictators such as Mussolini and Hitler in Europe in the 1930s. In Germany, the communist-aligned Anti-fascistisch Action, I think I'm pronouncing that right, fought street battles with Hitler's followers until it was forcibly disbanded in 1933. The tradition was revived in Europe during the 1980s and 1990s with the rise of Nazi skinheads and other far-right groups. It arrived in the U.S. in the late 1980s with the creation of Anti-Racist Action, or ARA, in Minneapolis. This movement, which is also strongly associated with anarchist politics, is not defined by lasting institutions. ARA no longer exists, and the oldest identifiable group in the U.S. is probably Portland's Rose City Antifa, which dates from 2007. All right. So what is Antifa? Antifa is, I don't know, I'm going to keep saying Antifa, I don't know, whichever one you prefer. It's a useful umbrella term that denotes a broad spectrum of groups and individuals of far left or anarchist tendencies. The term itself means simply anti-fascist. Mark Bray, historian and the author of Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, said that Antifa is a loose movement of decentralized revolutionary self-defense opposed to the far right. FBI Director Christopher Wray views Antifa as more of an ideology than an organization, which is to say it is difficult to single out individuals as members. According to Mark Bray again, who's the author of the Anti-Fascist Handbook, also a Dartmouth professor, he defines fascism, he says the Antifa radicals define fascism as whatever suits the moment. Bray says there is a lot of debate about what constitutes fascism, And it's a legitimate question to ask, where does one draw the line? He notes the slippery slope argument, which is that if you start calling everyone a fascist and depriving them of a platform, where does it end? Notably, he concludes, these are revolutionary leftists. These are self-described revolutionaries. They have no allegiance to liberal democracy, which they believe has failed the marginalized communities they're defending. They're anarchists and communists who are way outside the traditional conservative liberal spectrum. So this is really important. This group is anarchist. They're revolutionary. They do not believe in the democratic process. They're not interested in being part of the Democrats. Obviously not the Republicans, because they see pretty much everyone as fascist. So they're not interested in working within the system. They want revolution. They want anarchy. And they actually get upset when they feel like they're being co-opted by liberals or Democrats. That's not their goal. Their goal is not to work within the system. The other thing that strikes me is that I can see where anti-fascists were needed and had a place during World War II against actual fascism like Hitler and Mussolini. But like Bray says, if you start calling everyone fascist, then there's what are you fighting against? Everyone except for yourselves? And that's kind of where this group seems to have been going. All right. And as you'll continue, if I forget to mention, it seems like the modern day Antifa, their biggest enemy is Trump. So they view him as fascist. All right, so who are these protesters, or more like rioters? Antifa is composed of mostly white adolescent agitators, violent malcontents between 18 and 30 years of age, from about 200 autonomous anarchist and anti-capitalist factions. Thus, it's not an overtly formal organization. And this article says, yet. This article was written in 2017, but he updated it later, just recently, and he still says that it's not overtly formal yet. One of the rumors about them is that they are funded in part by George Soros. Of course, I'm not going to find anything online that's definitive proof of that. But Soros and his Open Society Foundation are anti-capitalism. So obviously his goal is going to align with, well, we'll get to there. But keep in mind that Soros's MO is to go in and disrupt and take down governments and put in the government that he supports, which is always going to be anti-capitalist. So obviously there are going to be some similar goals here. All right, and I don't know if you know this, but there is a website, It's Going Down. I think it's itsgoingdown.org. See if I can find it. It's a news blog. It doesn't say .org or .com, but I just went in and Googled It's Going Down. And they have a blog that is like a news blog for them that keeps them posted on the latest protests, where to attend them, what happened. And later I'm going to talk about Chaz and what's going on there. But there was a post about Chaz on It's Going Down. And it says, the organizer of that website says traffic on the website has grown from a few hundred daily hits to between 10,000 and 40,000 hits on its best day. He says there's a crisis among the left, and they're looking for alternatives outside of party structures. The anarchist movement is one that's working outside structures. People are excited about that. Again, outside structures. That means they are not interested in running for office or backing campaigns or funding parties or getting people elected at all. They're not interested in that. They are interested in anarchy. And this reminds me of the episode I posted maybe about a month ago, where I talked to the author of the book on parties and how they need a realignment. And this reminds me of how We are at a critical point in our history right now where our party system seems to have grown old and decayed and not addressing the issues that the people want them to address. And we are really ready for a realignment. And I think some of what we're seeing right now is a result of that. We see this group who see themselves as representing the disenfranchised or the ignored or the underrepresented, the underdog, because they don't feel like the parties represent those people. And I'm guessing they're not seeing the changes they want within the party. Now, I'm not saying that the parties need to embrace this. I'm saying that there needs to be some kind of outside of the box thinking that addresses some of the issues that they're concerned with. Obviously, rioting is not the way to do that, and anarchy is not the way to achieve helping out the underdog. Also, it's worth noting that one of the reasons that they've become more active over the last few years is because they were all energized by Bernie Sanders and his campaign, even though Sanders has disavowed them and says he's not. He disavows the violence and he's not connected with them. He is, however, a self-described democratic socialist. So again, if you're Antifa and socialism is one of your goals, then of course Sanders would excite you. All right. So let's look at some of their beliefs. This is another interesting thing about them. It's a position taken by many Antifa activists that, this is the quote, this is self-defense. They think that what they're doing is they're just defending themselves and the downtrodden, disenfranchised people that they represent from fascism, from white supremacy, or anyone else that they consider racist. And Trump is considered racist by them, or anyone on the far right. Okay, this is what they say. Antifa activists don't hesitate to destroy property, which many see as the incarnation of unfair wealth distribution. Again, there's the socialism piece. Violence against windows. There's no such thing as violence against windows, a masked Antifa member in Union Square told CNN. Windows they're not persons. And even when they are persons, the people we fight back against, they are evil. They are the living embodiment. They are the second coming of Hitler. This guy, Crow, that they're talking to, explained the ideology this way. Don't confuse legality and morality. Laws are made of governments, not of men, echoing the words of John Adams. Pretty sure John Adams would not be condoning the breaking of windows and looting, they don't loot, sorry, burning down of businesses. Crow explained the idea, each of us breaks the law every day. It's just that we make the conscious choice to do that, he said. Antifa members also sometimes launch attacks against people who aren't physically attacking them. The movement, Crow said, this is really important, sees alt-right hate speech as violent. And for that, its activists have opted to meet violence with violence. Right or wrong, that's for history to decide, he said. Okay, so this is really huge. They see what they consider hate speech as violence. So if someone says something that they don't like, that's violence, and so they can be violent with that person. So they can physically attack someone who says something they don't like. And that's for history to decide if that's right or wrong. So if any of you are feeling like you maybe sympathize with where they're coming from, maybe you think socialism is a worthwhile goal, or you want to represent the underrepresented, just remember that they don't believe in free speech. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, is not something that they value. That is not something that they honor. It's violence. So they are fully justified in attacking someone for saying something that they don't like. That's very, very important to remember. All right. So again, just to give you another idea of where they're coming from, what they believe in. This is after the protest at the Trump inauguration, and that was one of their biggest protests. So many of those arrested identified themselves as part of the Antifa movement. Its name derives from anti-fascist, and it has come to represent what experts who track these organizations call the hard left, an ideology that runs afield of the Democratic Party platform and supports oppressed populations as it protests the amassing of wealth by corporations and elites. They often denounce, they often say, Antifa activists who operate without any centralized leadership told CNN that their goal is peace and inclusivity. They say that. They often denounce capitalism and government. Although I don't know how you have socialism without government, because socialism requires authoritarian government. But anyway, since Trump entered the world stage, they've condemned his push to tighten immigration rules and what some view as his tendency towards racism. So they don't like capitalism, they don't like government, and they really don't like Trump and his push to tighten immigration. I'm guessing that they are for open borders, because somewhere I saw one of their chants was "No more USA." All right. And so obviously they are outside of the mainstream. They are way outside of even the left and the Democratic Party. And just to give you an idea of how they're outside, one of the nation's most noted liberal protagonists, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, warned that Democrat leaders are making a grave mistake by embracing those who want to tear down America and by not condemning both sides of the riotous mobs in Charlottesville, and I would add Chicago, Seattle, New York, all the other places that rioting is starting in, at least in part, by Antifa. He implores his fellow Democrats, do not glorify the violent people who are now tearing down the statues. Oh, guess what? It's going on again. Many of these people, not all of them, many of these people are trying to tear down America. Antifa is a radical, anti-America, anti-free market, communist, socialist, hard left, censorial organization. They use violence. I'm a liberal, and I think it's the obligation of liberals to speak out against the hard left radicals, just like it's the obligation of conservatives to speak out against the extremism of the hard right. In other words, police your own, people. Don't allow people that are doing extreme things because you think that they might help your cause to get away with doing these sorts of things. Police your own. Even Nancy Pelosi condemned Antifa back after Charlottesville, declaring, our democracy has no room for inciting violence or endangering the public, no matter the ideology of those who commit such acts. The violent actions of people calling themselves Antifa in Berkeley this weekend deserve unequivocal condemnation, and the perpetrators should be arrested and prosecuted. So this was obviously, again, a few years ago. All right, and just more ideas of where they're at, where Antifa is coming from. Crow, again, this is the one that I was quoting earlier, says, the philosophy of Antifa is based on the idea of direct action. The idea in Antifa is that we go where they go, the right-wingers go. That hate speech is not free speech. That if you are endangering people with what you say and the actions that are behind them, then you do not have the right to do that. And so we go to cause conflict, to shut them down where they are. Because we don't believe that Nazis or fascists of any stripe should have a mouthpiece. So if we're connecting the dots, if someone's a right-winger, if they're a Trump supporter, if they're what they consider fascist or what they consider racist, then they have to be shut down. And considering what's going on right now with these protests and how if you don't say Black Lives Matter or acknowledge your white privilege, you are automatically considered racist, then to me, that means that you're fair game for Antifa. Because by saying all lives matter, then you're racist, and you don't have the right to say that. And so it's open season for violence on you. And let's find out what some of the things that they're doing. All right. And this is again from, I think it was right after Charlottesville. What they are trying to do now is not only become prominent through violence at these high-profile rallies, but also to reach out through small meetings and through social networking to cultivate disenfranchised progressives who heretofore were peaceful. So in other words, they're going out and they're finding people that feel disenfranchised, which again, because our parties are failing us, they're crumbling. I don't know how many of you saw this, but I think the most annoying, I mean, obviously the looters and the rioters setting fire to businesses is horrible. And I'll probably do another episode on the aftermath of that and what that means, because they're causing tens of millions of dollars of damage to private property, to people who don't have either don't have insurance or don't even have the enough insurance to cover them, or they don't have enough capital to get back on their feet even with insurance, so they don't have the deductible. So people are losing their businesses because of this. I mean, I had someone on Facebook one day say something that just blew my mind. When he saw that this was happening, and I guess he relates to these people trying to achieve civil rights. These mostly I think this was a combination of Black Lives Matters folks and Antifa, and he saw the destruction. And he said, well, this needs to happen. That's the only way you get anyone's attention. And there's insurance that will fix those windows and those businesses. Well, I beg to differ, because now I've got articles that say, quoting people that say, we don't even have the deductibles to pay. Because guess what? We just went through a massive shutdown of our economy for what, 2.5 months? So these businesses are already on the brink of closing, and then they're just getting back open again, and they're shut down by this. And by the way, I do believe that the shutdowns are part of what fueled this. A lot of people have been stuck at home, not working and either not making money or sitting at home making money. But either way, sitting at home, stewing, and ready to get out. And then, you just light that match and boom, they're off like a powder keg. So thank you, governments, for shutting us down and helping to create this. You know, how many of these disenfranchised 18 to 30-year-olds were sitting around in their parents' basements, you know, and then they saw an opportunity to get out? Because obviously there's no real unifying goal or value system behind here, because it's anarchy, it's socialism, and no government. You can't do socialism and no government at the same time. And representing the disenfranchised or the people that don't feel like they're heard. And it's anyone that doesn't believe what they believe is fair game. To me, my belief is that it's a generalized anger at life in general, and finding an outlet. And guess what? If you can put a mask on, and now it's even easier because they're telling people to wear masks while they're protesting. Anyway, they're putting on masks so they have anonymity, and then they're getting out there and just letting loose. And they hate trash cans. Have you noticed that? I don't know what they have against trash cans. But one of the things it says is, while it can be difficult to distinguish Antifa activists from other protesters, some dress head to toe in black. Members call this the Black Bloc. And you've probably, some of you have seen that. I want to read a little description of what the Black Bloc is. And, you know, it's meant to create fear, and it does. Black Bloc is a group of protesters who wear black clothing, ski masks, scarves, sunglasses, motorcycle helmets with padding, or other face-concealing and face-protecting items. The clothing is used to conceal wearers' identities and hinder criminal prosecution by making it difficult to distinguish between participants. It is also used to protect their faces and eyes from pepper spray, which is used by law enforcement during protests or civil unrest. The tactic allows the group to appear as one large unified mass. Black Bloc participants are often associated with anarchism, anarcho-communism, libertarian socialism, anti-globalization movement, or anti-fascism. Libertarian socialism to me is an oxymoron, by the way. You need authoritarianism to enforce socialism and communism. So to me, it just spells anger. The tactic was developed in the 1980s in the European autonomous movements, protests against squatter evictions, nuclear power, and restrictions on abortion, as well as other influences. Black blocs gained broader media attention outside Europe during the 1999 Seattle WTO protests, and a black bloc damaged property of Gap, Starbucks, Old Navy, and other multinational retail locations in downtown Seattle. Remember the Occupy movement? All these young thugs that were protesting, the corporations as they were tweeting on their iPhones. Yeah. Anyway, all right, and so Attorney General Barr confirms that in many places it appears the violence is planned, organized, and driven by far-left extremist groups and anarchic groups using Antifa-like tactics. In an official DOJ statement, he added, groups of outside radicals and agitators are exploiting the situation to pursue their own separate violent and extremist agenda. It is time to stop watching the violence and to confront and stop it. The violence instigated and carried out by Antifa is domestic terrorism and will be treated accordingly. And this is because, of course, Trump is trying to have them, Antifa, named as terrorists, a terrorist organization, which would be kind of difficult since they're local. But anyway, one of the dangers here is that because Antifa is not organized and it's these thugs that get together, they go on Facebook and there's basically a call sent out. We're going to go do this protest. We're going to go do this, whatever. And because of the Black Bloc, the whole anonymity, and there's no leader, there's no organization, it's pretty easy for them to be joined or egged on or infiltrated by some organized groups that want to get out there and do some disruption, like, say, a George Soros. So there are a lot of issues with this. Some of the tactics that they use. Okay, so this is from the police report after a protest in Portland. Portland has a lot of problems with these folks. This is from June 4th, May Day protest. I think this was 2017. All right, says, we did seize a large number of weapons or things that could be used as weapons. Everything from knives to brass knuckles to poles and sticks and bricks and bottles and road flares and chains. 100% they came geared up to fight if it would be allowed. And also what some of the, I mean, I don't know how much to believe it, but some of the right-wing groups that they've come up against, some of these white supremacist groups have said that it's the Antifa that always starts the violence. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've seen that more than once, that they're the ones that are always ready to start. So it's like come spoiling for a fight. That's why I say generalized anger. They're not specific in what they want. There's no specific demands. It's just generalized anger against the man, against government, against America. All right. And another thing that it says is that most new Antifa members don't fall into a stereotype that since the election of President Trump, most new Antifa members are young voters. And I would say they're generally white folks. And so one of the things I've been trying to figure out recently, because it's obvious that Antifa is in Chicago, is in New York, where these pallets of bricks are being set out. And so what I'm wondering is if they're not organized, where are the bricks coming from? Somebody's providing that. It would be really nice if journalists would actually do their jobs and get out there and find out, in these protests. But where are the bricks coming from? Embed yourselves in some of these protests and watch what happens. And so there's this thing going on in Seattle where there's groups that have taken over 6 blocks of downtown in the Capitol Heights area. They're calling it Capitol Heights Autonomous Zone. And they've basically taken it over and decided declared it to be not part of the United States anymore. Oh, by the way, if you're watching the video, see this shirt? I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. You can find my shirt on AnnetteTalks.com, just FYI. I designed it. Anyway, in Chaz, which I wish I could go down there and see it, because I found several videos online. There was even a live stream on YouTube that didn't show much. But I'm hearing all these different reports. Most of the right-wing journalism is saying that there are militants down there, it's Antifa and militant Black Lives Matters. I don't know why I keep saying it wrong. Black Lives Matter folks that have taken over and set up these barricades, and that it's this militant group, and they're making all these demands. They have made the demands. I've seen other videos and heard other reports that there's basically like a street fair atmosphere with lots of hippies and dope smokers, and they're reading poetry, they're watching movies, they're having concerts, they're painting the ground. And the video that I watched at night is all sorts of just regular average citizens walking around down there, walking their dogs, kids, And so, but the demands that they're making are things like getting rid of, defunding the police, getting rid of prisons. Instead of, it says, replacing the police with restorative / transformative accountability programs. They want, I don't have the whole list here, but they want a lot of socialization of education. They want Black doctors to treat Black patients. I mean, they have a whole list of things that were not really cohesive, number one. Mostly seem to be geared towards Black rights. And so I've been trying to figure out, because I've seen, some of these articles that say that Chaz has been taken over by Antifa and by Black Lives Matter. And so from what I'm seeing, some of these demands align with some of the things that Antifa wants, but some of the head of Chaz, like some of the de facto heads, Nikita Oliver, a radical activist and former mayoral candidate, emerged as a critical voice of the protest movement and assumed a leadership role in the newly declared autonomous zone. And she says, we need to align ourselves with the global struggle that acknowledges that the United States plays a role in radicalized capitalism. She told protesters, radicalized capitalism is built upon patriarchy, white supremacy, and classicism. And then there's a rapper whose name I don't have in front of me right now, who's also kind of delegated himself as a leader. And so obviously this is anti-capitalism, anti-patriarchy, saying that America is racist and classist. So some of these same goals or same complaints that Antifa has. So my guess from everything I've gathered about Chaz is that I'm guessing there might be some Antifa in there, along with some militant Black Lives Matter folks who set up the barricades, who are doing the policing of it, who are trying to run it, who are making the demands. But that's a small group that's trying to run a much larger gathering of people, and that the largest gathering in there are either just protesters or just curiosity seekers or artists or whatever. But I really hope that can come down. I would like to see them just turn off the sewers, turn off the water, and basically say, disperse. Get out of there. Another friend online had a great idea. She said, cut off Wi-Fi, cut off cell service. I thought, yeah, that'll get rid of all of them. All the millennials, all the Gen Zs, everybody. That'll get rid of them. Nobody's going to stick around if they can't get on their cell phones. Anyway, so that's my take on Antifa. Not organized, not a cohesive movement, but dangerous in their disorganization and dangerous in their lack of demands or lack of what they want. They're just violent, they're angry, and they're violent. and they don't respect the First Amendment, so they think they're justified. How dangerous they're going to be down the line, I don't know. But when they start combining with Black Lives Matter, who it's silly to say that actually, because there's Black Lives Matter, which is an organization that has a website and a list of beliefs. And then there's this now the hashtag or the slogan that we're all supposed to say that seems to have just now mean we believe in equal rights for Black people. That seems to be what it means. But the actual organization is very radical and goes well beyond just saying that Blacks need rights. So if you get the militant organizational head of Black Lives Matter and Antifa together, that's an explosive combination who are going to look to bring down the country. And what we're seeing in Chicago and New York, Minneapolis, and to some degree in Seattle is what I'm afraid is coming to a town near you. So now you know what they are. Our government, our governors, our mayors cannot allow this. One of the quotes that I found earlier basically blamed the Minneapolis mayor, I think Jacob Fry is his name, for allowing the rioters and the looters to get away with it when it first started. He could have shut the whole thing down, but now he set a precedent that allowed the rioting and looting to spread to these other cities, and now we've got it all over the country. So our government needs to take a hard line against the rioters and the protesters, understanding where they're coming from. And obviously there's a difference between protesters who are peacefully protesting, which is an American right and an American value, and rioting and looting and anarchy-driven individuals. So that's Antifa. Let me know what you think about this episode or this topic, any other episode at AnnetteTalks.com, on YouTube or Facebook /Annette Talks. And thank you all for listening. Tune in next time when I will be sharing my episode with Matt Townsend, who is one of my favorite guys, completely off the political topic, but a wonderful, wonderful episode. Anyway, thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness.